The massive crystalline dome of the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime hummed with anxious energy as representatives from 4 to 7 species took their designated positions. The transparent walls stretched high above, allowing the light of 3 distant stars to cast rainbow patterns across the polished floor. Ambassador Kim Ji-woo smoothed down her dark blue diplomatic uniform, feeling the weight of the small Earth insignia on her collar as it caught the artificial starlight. The human delegation may observe, but they hold no voting privileges, announced Chancellor Vextar of the Hegemony. His 4 eyes moved in different directions as he spoke, a trait that most species found unsettling. 2 of those eyes fixed on Ji-woo's small group with obvious dismissal. The Chancellor's voice carried across the chamber through universal translators, turning his alien speech into words every delegate could understand. Beside her, Captain Park Min-ho leaned closer and whispered, "They still think we're children playing dress-up." His hand rested casually on the data pad containing information that would shock every being in the room, but Ji-woo had told him to wait. Timing was everything in diplomacy. The emergency session had been called to address the growing devourer threat, and the mood in the chamber reflected the gravity of the situation. For 3 months, the ancient machine intelligence had consumed 12 outer rim worlds. Each attack followed the same pattern. The machines would arrive without warning, strip every piece of metal and technology from the surface, and leave behind nothing but barren rock in silent space where thriving colonies once existed. Billions of lives had been lost, and the survivors spoke of machines that moved with purpose and efficiency that chilled the blood. Ji-woo listened carefully as speaker after speaker took the floor. The assembled delegates spoke of retreat, of finding new worlds farther from the advancing mechanical tide. Fear filled their voices, and she could see it in their body language regardless of species. The Altarians, beings of living crystal, flickered with nervous energy. The bat-like Zephyrians kept their wings wrapped tight around their bodies. Even the massive hegemony representatives, normally confident in their military might, seemed smaller somehow. "We must establish safe zones," declared the Altarian representative, his crystalline form catching the light as he gestured. "Perhaps we can offer them the outer worlds as tribute. The machines seem interested only in metal and technology. If we give them what they want, they might leave our populated worlds alone." Murmurs of agreement rippled through parts of the assembly. Ji-woo felt her jaw clench. These beings had survived and thrived in space for thousands of years, yet they were ready to feed entire worlds to the machines in the hope of buying time. The Zephyrian military commander spread his wings as he addressed the chamber. "Our defensive analysis shows that retreat to the inner systems is our best option. We can establish a strong defensive line around the core worlds. Let them have the rim territories. We can rebuild elsewhere." More voices joined the discussion, each proposing variations of the same theme: run, hide, give up territory, and hope the machines would be satisfied. Ji-woo watched the debate with growing frustration. These species had impressive technology, vast fleets, and centuries of experience in warfare. Yet faced with a real threat, they were choosing to act like prey animals instead of the apex predators they claimed to be. Captain Park shifted beside her, and she could sense his impatience. The rest of her small delegation remained perfectly still, but she knew they were all thinking the same thing. While these aliens debated surrender disguised as strategy, humanity had been preparing for war. After 2 hours of listening to increasingly desperate proposals, Ji-woo had heard enough. She rose from her seat, her movement causing a brief lull in the conversation as delegates noticed the human taking action. "Request permission to address the council," she said, her voice clear and calm. The chamber fell silent for a moment, then erupted in a ripple of surprised chittering, clicks, and whistles as species communicated their shock in their native languages. Several delegates turned to stare at the small human delegation. Some looked amused, others annoyed that a representative of such a young species would dare interrupt. Chancellor Vextar's expression darkened, his 4 eyes now all focused on Ji-woo. When he spoke, his tone carried the weight of authority built over centuries of galactic politics. "The humans have no standing in this matter. Your species has barely achieved interstellar travel. You have been part of galactic civilization for less than 50 years. What could you possibly contribute to a discussion of this magnitude?" The dismissal in his voice was clear, and Ji-woo could see similar attitudes reflected in the faces and postures of delegates throughout the chamber. To them, humanity was a curiosity at best, a minor species that had stumbled into space travel and somehow managed to avoid destroying itself long enough to make contact with real civilizations. "With respect, Chancellor," Ji-woo replied, maintaining her calm tone despite the insult, "that may be precisely why you need to hear what I have to say." She remained standing, meeting the Chancellor's gaze directly. Around the chamber, delegates began murmuring among themselves. Some seemed curious about what the human might say. Others appeared irritated by the interruption. But all of them were watching her now, and that was exactly what she needed. The weight of Earth's hopes rested on her next words, and she was ready to deliver them. After 30 minutes of heated debate among the delegates, Chancellor Vextar finally raised his ceremonial staff for silence. The chamber gradually quieted, though Jiwoo could still hear whispered conversations in various alien languages echoing off the crystalline walls. The council will grant the human representative 5 minutes to speak, Vextar announced, his tone suggesting he considered this a waste of valuable time. Nothing more. Jiwoo nodded respectfully and walked toward the central podium. Her footsteps echoed clearly in the suddenly quiet chamber, each sound seeming louder than it should be. The polished floor reflected the starlight from above, creating the illusion that she was walking across a field of stars. As she reached the speaking platform, she could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes focused on her. The podium was designed for beings much larger than humans, forcing her to look up at most of the delegates. She had expected this and came prepared. From her uniform pocket, she withdrew a small device that projected a platform of solid light beneath her feet, raising her to the proper height. Several delegates made sounds of surprise at the casual display of advanced technology. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic design, I have listened to your discussions for 3 hours. Every proposal I have heard, every strategy suggested, every plan put forward shares one fatal flaw. They all assume the devourers can be reasoned with, delayed, or avoided through clever positioning. She paused, allowing her words to settle in the minds of her audience. Then she activated her personal holoprojector, a device that looked deceptively simple but contained more computing power than most species had achieved just decades ago. The air above the podium shimmered, then resolved into a three-dimensional display of tactical data that made several military advisors lean forward with sudden interest. Intelligence Officer Lee Sumin has spent the past month compiling data from every known devourer encounter, Jiwoo continued, gesturing to the holographic display. Charts and graphs appeared in the air, showing attack patterns, timing, and results with mathematical precision. 4 to 7 separate encounters across 12 different star systems. The patterns are clear to anyone willing to see them. The display shifted, showing the locations and timing of attacks in a way that revealed the underlying strategy. Red dots marked destroyed worlds, yellow indicated damaged systems, and green showed places where evacuations had been successful. But when viewed together, a disturbing pattern emerged. These machines are not seeking resources or territory, Jiwoo stated firmly. They are executing an extermination protocol. Every successful evacuation, every strategic withdrawal that you celebrate as a victory, serves their purpose by spreading panic and fragmenting our defensive capabilities. A ripple of uncomfortable movement passed through the assembly. The Altarian delegate's crystalline form flickered with agitation. Several Zephyrians clicked their teeth in distress. The implications of what she was saying began to sink in. General Keth Moore of the Hegemony military rose from his seat, his massive frame casting a shadow across several smaller delegates. His species was known for their pride in military matters, and Jiwoo's analysis clearly challenged everything they believed about warfare. Young human, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for centuries, you speak as if your species has faced such threats before. What could a race that has barely left its home system possibly know about warfare on this scale? The chamber fell silent, waiting for her response. This was the moment Jiwoo had been preparing for since Earth had first detected the Devourer signals months ago. She turned to face General Kethmore directly, her expression calm but determined. We have, she replied simply. Not machines like these, but existential threats that demanded the complete eradication of the enemy force. My colleague, strategic analyst Nam Hyun Woo, has identified 17 historical parallels from human warfare where similar tactics were employed. The holographic display changed again, this time showing a timeline of human conflicts. The images were carefully chosen to illustrate points without being too graphic for the diverse alien audience. Battle maps, strategic movements, and outcome statistics filled the air above the podium. In each case studied, defensive strategies alone resulted in total defeat, Jiwoo continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. The defending forces would establish strong positions, fall back when pressed, establish new positions, and repeat the process until they had no more room to retreat. The attacking force, meanwhile, grew stronger with each victory, learning from each encounter and adapting their methods. She pointed to specific examples in the display. The pattern is always the same. The defenders focus on protecting what they have, while the attackers focus on taking everything. One strategy is limited by fear of loss. The other is driven by the certainty of gain. Nam Hyun Woo stood from his seat in the human delegation area and activated his own datapad. Additional information flowed into Jiwoo's display, showing detailed analysis of Devourer movement patterns and attack methodologies. The Devourers are allowing some of you to escape, Jiwoo said, her words cutting through the chamber like a blade. They want you afraid and divided. Fear is their greatest weapon, and you are handing them victory without firing a shot. The silence that followed was different from before. Where there had been dismissive quiet, now there was thoughtful consideration tinged with growing alarm. Delegates began looking at each other with new understanding, seeing their own evacuation plans and defensive strategies in a darker light. Murmurs of unease rippled through the assembly as the implications of her analysis became clear. The machines were not just randomly attacking. They were systematically destroying the galaxy's ability to mount coordinated resistance, using the survivor's own survival instincts against them. Jiwoo waited, letting the weight of realization settle over the chamber before speaking again. The tension in the chamber grew thick as delegates absorbed the implications of Jiwoo's analysis. Many shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others whispered urgently to their advisors. The carefully maintained diplomatic atmosphere began to crack under the weight of uncomfortable truths. The Altarian delegate rose slowly from his position, his crystalline form catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the nearby walls. When his species felt strong emotions, their bodies would shimmer and change color, and right now he was practically glowing with agitation. His voice, when it came through the universal translator, carried the harmonics that marked deep concern among his people. Even if your assessment is correct, human, he said, the crystal formations on his head pulsing with nervous energy, what alternative do we have? The Devourers possess technology that is beyond our understanding. Their ships move faster than anything we have ever built. Their weapons can slice through our strongest defenses like they are made of paper. Military resistance would be nothing more than elaborate suicide. Other delegates nodded in agreement, their various forms of expression showing the same sentiment. The bat-like Zephyrians wrapped their wings tighter around their bodies. The insectoid hive-mind representatives clicked their mandibles in patterns that indicated stress. Even the proud hegemony members, with their 4 arms and multiple eyes, seemed to shrink slightly in their seats. Jiwoo looked across the assembly, seeing the fear that had taken hold of these beings. These were species that had conquered star systems, built incredible technologies, and survived for thousands of years in the dangerous depths of space. Yet faced with the Devourers, they had convinced themselves that surrender was the only rational choice. She exchanged a glance with Captain Park Minho, who sat in the front row of the human delegation. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the slight tension around his eyes that meant he was ready for whatever came next. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod, a gesture so small that only someone who had worked with him for years would notice it. That tiny movement told her everything she needed to know. The preparations were complete. The fleets were in position. Earth's children were ready for war. Counselors, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber despite its size, I stand before you today not to debate strategy or request aid. I have not come here to ask for your permission or seek your approval for humanity's actions. The chamber began to quiet as delegates realized something important was happening. The background murmur of translated conversations faded until the only sound was the gentle hum of the building's environmental systems. I come to inform you of humanity's decision, she continued. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the environmental systems seemed to grow quieter, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Hundreds of alien beings sat frozen in their seats, waiting for words that would change everything. We have observed the Devourer advance for months, Jiwoo said, her voice steady and clear. We have analyzed their tactics, studied their technology, and prepared our response. While you have debated retreat, we have been forging weapons. While you have planned evacuations, we have been training soldiers. She stepped forward on the platform, moving closer to the edge so that every delegate could see her clearly. Her hands moved to clasp behind her back in a military stance that transcended species barriers. Every being in the chamber, regardless of their biology or culture, understood the meaning of that posture. It was the stance of a warrior preparing for battle. The time for war has come. The chamber erupted like a volcano. Delegates leaped to their feet, shouting in dozens of different languages. The universal translators struggled to keep up with the sudden flood of voices, creating a cacophony of fear, outrage, and disbelief that echoed off the crystalline walls. Some species made sounds that had no equivalent in human language but clearly expressed shock and horror. The hegemony representatives gestured wildly with all four of their arms. The Zephyrians spread their wings and screeched in harmonics that made the air vibrate. The Altarians flashed through colors so quickly they looked like living fireworks. Even the normally calm ethereal collective began to glow with agitated energy. Chancellor Vextar raised his ceremonial staff and brought it down hard against the podium beside his seat. The sound rang out like a bell, but it took several repetitions before the chamber began to quiet. His four eyes moved independently, trying to take in the chaos that had erupted throughout the assembly. "Order," he called out, his voice amplified by the chamber's systems. "We will have order in this chamber." Through the noise, the Zephyrian commander's voice cut like a blade. "You speak of suicide," he called out, his wings still spread wide in a display of aggression. "Your species will be destroyed, and you will drag the rest of us down with you." Jiwoo waited for the chaos to die down, standing perfectly still on her platform. She did not try to shout over the noise or demand attention. She simply waited, her calm presence eventually drawing the focus of the chamber back to her. When the voices finally faded to angry murmurs, she spoke again. "No," she said, her voice cutting through the remaining whispers. "I do not speak of suicide. I speak of victory." The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence was different. It was the silence of predators deciding whether to attack or flee. "The Devourers made one critical error in their calculations," she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "They assumed we would react like the rest of you. They were wrong." The chamber remained tense as delegates tried to understand what the human ambassador meant by her confident words. Many still believed that humanity was too young and inexperienced to pose any real threat to the Devourers. The silence stretched for long moments as Jiwoo stood calmly on her platform, waiting for the right moment to reveal what Earth had been hiding. "Display authorization, Alpha 77 Charlie," she commanded, speaking clearly into her holoprojector's voice pickup system. The small device in her hand suddenly connected with the chamber's main display systems, something that should have been impossible without council approval and security clearance. The massive holographic arrays built into the chamber's walls and ceiling activated all at once, filling the enormous space with a three-dimensional tactical overview that made several delegates gasp in shock and lean back in their seats. The display showed a detailed map of human space, but it was nothing like what the Council's intelligence reports had suggested. Instead of a handful of colonies struggling to establish themselves, the hologram revealed a vast network of hidden installations, shipyards, and defensive positions spread across dozens of star systems. "The Human Defense Initiative has been operational for 8 months, Jiwoo announced, her voice carrying easily through the stunned chamber. "Admiral Kang Jizu commands a fleet of 2,000 warships, constructed in classified shipyards throughout the Sol system and our 12 colony worlds." The numbers hit the assembly like a physical blow. 2,000 warships represented a larger fleet than most species had built in their entire history. The hegemony, considered one of the major military powers in the galaxy, maintained only 800 active vessels. Even the combined fleets of the Inner System Alliance barely reached 1,500 ships. The holographic display began to rotate, showing detailed images of the human fleet. The vessels were sleek and deadly looking, with lines unlike anything the Council had seen before. They bristled with weapons systems that seemed to grow from the ship's hulls like mechanical thorns. Each vessel was clearly built for one purpose: war. Military Attaché Choi Yuna stepped forward from the human delegation area, her movements precise and controlled. Her uniform bore insignia that several military commanders in the chamber recognized as belonging to a strategic command structure, though they had never seen this particular design before. Her presence added weight to Jiwoo's words, showing that this was not just diplomatic posturing but military reality. "These ships were designed using captured Devourer technology," Yuna explained, her voice calm and professional. The holographic display shifted to show technical specifications and weapon details that made the assembled military advisors sit up straight in their chairs. 3 months ago, our forces intercepted a Devourer scout group near Kepler 442. We destroyed all 7 units and successfully reverse-engineered their systems. The chamber erupted in whispers and exclamations of disbelief. The Kepler 442 incident had been reported as a complete loss, with all defending ships destroyed and the system evacuated. Yet here was evidence that humans had not only survived the encounter but had won a decisive victory. The machine's greatest strength, their networked intelligence that allows them to coordinate perfectly across vast distances, is also their greatest weakness, Yuna continued. When you disrupt their network connections, they become isolated and much easier to defeat. The display shifted again, showing weapon specifications in detail. Charts and diagrams filled the air, displaying technology that seemed decades ahead of what most species possessed. Several military commanders leaned forward with intense interest, their earlier dismissal of human capabilities completely forgotten. Quantum disruption torpedoes designed specifically to sever machine neural links, Jiwoo continued, taking back control of the presentation. Electromagnetic pulse arrays calibrated to match their specific shielding frequencies. And most importantly, adaptive artificial intelligence systems that learn and counter their tactics in real time during battle. The hegemony's chief scientist, a being whose species had spent centuries studying advanced physics, rose from his seat with obvious agitation. His multiple arms gestured at the display in disbelief, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had spent his lifetime understanding the limits of technology. "This is impossible," he said, breathing heavily through his species' complex respiratory system. "Your species lacks the technical knowledge to create such advanced systems. Your civilization has barely mastered basic fusion power. These weapons require understanding of quantum mechanics that takes centuries to develop." Jiwoo turned to face him directly, her expression calm but determined. She corrected, emphasizing the past tense. "We did lack that knowledge. We have had very good teachers." The holographic display changed once more, this time showing images that made the entire chamber fall silent. Twisted wreckage of Devourer units lay scattered across what appeared to be human research facilities. Teams of human engineers and scientists worked alongside the alien metal and circuitry, their equipment interfacing directly with technology that most species considered impossibly advanced. The images showed humans not just studying the machines, but actively rebuilding and improving them. Devourer weapons were being mounted on human ships. Machine armor was being analyzed and replicated. Most shocking of all, some humans appeared to be working with partially functional Devourer AI systems, using the machine's own intelligence to understand their weaknesses. "We offer this technology freely to any species willing to stand with us," Jiwoo said, her words carrying across the dead silent chamber. "Our engineers are prepared to share everything we have learned, every weapon we have built, every tactical advantage we have discovered." She paused, letting her offer sink in before delivering her final statement. "But make no mistake about our intentions or our resolve. With or without your support, with or without your approval, humanity will fight." The debate that followed Jiwoo's revelation was unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever witnessed. For 14 straight hours, delegates argued, shouted, and pleaded as they tried to process what humanity had shown them. The chamber's environmental systems worked overtime to manage the heat generated by hundreds of agitated beings, while translation systems struggled to keep up with the flood of emotional outbursts in dozens of languages. Some delegates condemned what they saw as humanity's deception and aggressive nature. The ethereal collective spokesperson, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with angry red light as she spoke. "This barbaric warmongering proves that humans are not ready for civilized society," she declared, her voice resonating through harmonic frequencies. "They have been secretly building weapons while we sought peaceful solutions." The hegemony delegation was even more direct in their opposition. General Kethmore stood with all four of his massive arms crossed, his multiple eyes glaring at the human representatives. "We call for humanity's immediate expulsion from civilized space," he announced. "They are a danger to all peaceful species. Their aggressive instincts will drag us all into unnecessary conflict." But other voices spoke in humanity's favor. The Zephyrian commander, who had earlier dismissed human capabilities, now demanded immediate access to their weapons technology. "If these humans can truly defeat the Devourers," he said, his wings spread wide with excitement, "then we must learn from them. Our survival may depend on their innovations." The Altarian delegate, his crystalline form now glowing with hope instead of fear, added his support. "Perhaps we have been thinking about this threat in the wrong way. If the humans can show us how to fight back effectively, we should listen to them." As the hours passed, the arguments grew more intense. Species that had been allies for centuries found themselves on opposite sides of the debate. Ancient rivalries surfaced as the stress of the situation pushed diplomatic restraint to its breaking point. The chamber's security systems activated twice as minor physical confrontations broke out between delegates. Through it all, the human delegation sat quietly, letting the aliens work through their fears and prejudices. Jiwoo knew that forcing a decision would only make things worse. The other species needed time to accept that their assumptions about humanity had been completely wrong. Then, as dawn broke over Nexus Prime, emergency alerts began flooding into the chamber. Communications officers from various species rushed to their delegates with urgent messages. The large display screens around the chamber activated, showing real-time reports from across the galaxy. The Devourers had launched their largest offensive yet. A massive fleet of machine ships, larger than anything previously seen, had descended upon the Centauri defense line. This was the Council's primary fortress system, a collection of heavily armed space stations and automated defense platforms that protected the approaches to the core worlds. Incoming transmission from Centauri Command announced the chamber's communication system. The main screen flickered, then showed the image of Admiral Thexcal, a proud hegemony officer whose career had been built on defensive warfare. But the being on the screen looked nothing like the confident military leader the Council knew. His uniform was torn, smoke filled the air behind him, and his eyes showed the strain of desperate combat. The automated defenses that held for 3 months have crumbled in less than 6 hours, he reported, his voice barely steady. The machines have adapted to every weapon system we deployed. They're cutting through our strongest shields like they're made of paper. We estimate total system loss within 48 hours. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Centauri defense line was supposed to be impregnable. If it could fall in 2 days, then nothing stood between the Devourers and the heavily populated inner systems. General Kethmore, his earlier arrogance completely gone, stepped forward with grim urgency. The machines have learned to counter our static defenses, he admitted. Everything we thought we knew about defensive warfare has become useless. They adapt faster than we can modify our strategies. It was at this moment that Jiwoo rose from her seat one final time. The chamber's attention focused on her as she walked back to the central podium. Her calm demeanor stood in sharp contrast to the panic beginning to spread through the assembly. "Councillors," she said, her voice cutting through the growing noise, "while you have been debating the morality of our actions, Admiral Kang Jiz's third fleet has been moving into position. We have 1,200 ships ready for immediate deployment. We can be at Centauri in 18 hours, but only if we leave now." The weight of decision pressed down on every delegate in the chamber. Chancellor Vextar looked around the assembly, seeing fear and uncertainty in every face, but also the beginning of desperate hope. The theoretical debate about human warfare had suddenly become a matter of immediate survival. "The motion before us is clear," he announced, his voice carrying the authority of his office. "Do we authorize the formation of a joint military command with human strategic oversight?" The voting process that followed was tense and close. Electronic displays showed the tally as each species cast their decision. 26 species voted in favor of the alliance, 15 voted against, and 6 chose to abstain from the decision entirely. Then by the authority vested in this council by the Galactic Charter, Chancellor Vextar declared formally, "I hereby establish the Galactic Defense Alliance, with Ambassador Kim Ji-woo appointed as Strategic Command Coordinator." The chamber immediately transformed into a center of military activity. Delegates activated emergency communication systems, calling their home fleets and defense forces. Captain Park Min-ho approached Ji-woo with a secure communicator, its screen already showing Admiral Kang's face. "Admiral Kang is requesting immediate orders, Coordinator," Park said, emphasizing Ji-woo's new title with obvious pride. Ji-woo took the device, knowing that her next words would be heard not just by the Admiral, but by every delegate in the chamber through the open communication channels. "Today, we stop running. Today, we fight back. Today, we show the universe that when pushed to the brink, the galaxy doesn't just defend, it conquers." The war against the Devourers would be long and costly, but for the first time in months, hope had returned.